Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm both honored and humbled to be speaking with you with two of our best speakers, mashallah, not only in North America, but in the world, mashallah. So you have just feasted on inspirational stories, inspirational and educational stories. So I'm faced with the challenge of giving you practical advice on parenting tips, okay? And helping you to raise your parenting style to a higher level. Now, it's like you have just feasted on a buffet, okay? You've had your appetizers, you've had the main course, you even had your dessert, and I'm gonna offer you some Brussels sprouts, okay? Now, inshallah, Brussels sprouts are good for you, and this is gonna be, inshallah, beneficial. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. We were first amazed by all the things that Ustaz Nu'man Ali Khan told us, mashallah, a comprehensive explanation of the meaning of the word The purpose, it means purpose, lifestyle, leadership, the uniqueness. This is telling us the important role that mothers have. Who knew how many meanings that this one little word had, subhanallah. And in Arabic, any word that has a lot of meaning to it, the more meaning it has, the more important that it is. So Jazakallah khair for that deeper understanding of such a beautiful word. And we were completely blown away, mashallah, by all the stories of these amazing mothers. I'm sure you're all inspired. And what's amazing to me is that these mothers were not trained as psychologists, but they applied some of the skills and some of the excellent tools in raising their kids. And these are the tips that psychologists now say are so necessary for effective parenting. So you see the story of Sulaim, the mother of Anas ibn Malik, and how she empowered her son. She empowered him by making him feel so valuable. And that's by taking him to the Bay'atul Aqaba and getting him to meet the Prophet ﷺ. And not only did she value him, but she respected him by making him be the one who did the marriage ceremony between her and her husband. I thought that was beautiful. And Ammar modeled the behavior of courage by going into the battlefield. She didn't just speak it. She didn't just say, be a good Muslim, be courageous. She embodied it and she modeled this behavior. And she was in the battlefield protecting the Prophet ﷺ. So she walked the talk. And that's what it takes. As far as being a parent, you need to walk the talk because that's how children are going to respond. Sumayya radiallahu anha, she was the first mother, the first martyr, and she demonstrated strength and conviction by her actions. And Imam Malik's mom spent time and money. She invested in her children. She invested in Imam Malik, and she traveled and she put quality time. This is something that we really take for granted, the time that we spend with our children. But because she invested in her son and made him feel important and valued by being with him, he became the man that he is. She prioritized him. So any knowledge that we try to seek, we always, whenever we want to get any field, if we want to be an expert in medicine or engineering, or we want to become a lawyer, what do? We first seek education, right? We don't rely on trial and error, let's say to learn to become a pilot. That would be disastrous, right? You don't rely on common sense to construct a building. Now, we are constructing a human being. When we are raising a child, we are constructing this human being, which is so much more valuable, right? And so why do we trivialize parenting? Why do we leave it to common sense, to trial and error, and to chance? So usually, there are two groups of parents, okay? There's the one group who knows the importance of seeking an education, learning the psychological skills, having tools to raise their kids properly. And these are people like yourselves who are attending a conference, trying to learn, trying to be a better parent. And then there's a group of parents who basically leave it to chance. They leave it to the upbringing they had, whatever worked, and it's very haphazard. There's no set rules. And what happens with these individuals is that their son or daughter becomes a teenager. And once they become a teenager, because they didn't have the tools to raise them properly, because they weren't instilled with the right values, what happens is that they start drifting away. They will experiment. They may get boyfriends and girlfriends and go into alcohol, do so many things. And guess what do? They call up the sheikh. They'll call Sheikh Omar or call Sheikh or Ustaz Nu'man and say, fix my son, fix my daughter, right? And this is because a lack of knowledge. What do we need to do? Okay. Everyone's awake now? We're going to do that periodically to make sure that no one snoozes during the lectures. All right. So we said that everybody wants what's best for their kids, right? Every single person wants what is best for them. And it's just a matter of seeing who is going to take that extra mile and seek who's going to, it's not on? Okay. Small technical problem. Yes. All right, so we were just talking about that everybody wants what's best. Everybody wants what's best for their kids, and it's just about seeing who will go that extra mile to provide what's best for them, right? So why do we leave parenting to chance? Allah says in Surah Al-Anbiya, ayah number 7, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ in kuntum la ta'lamun, right? So ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. So if you don't know about it, make sure you find out the information and things that will benefit you. And the earlier you implement this knowledge, the more beneficial it'll be. I've had many clients that they come to me where they haven't put any rules, no regulations, no guidelines for their kids, and basically their kids are running wild. They're running wild and they're ruling the house. And everyone is afraid of that little kid. How many of you know someone like that? Oh yeah, lots of hands, lots of hands. And you know, it reminds me actually of the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he said that one of the signs of the day of judgment is when a slave girl gives birth to her master, right? And when I first heard this, it's like, what does that even mean? Maybe you were puzzled about it too, but it's referring to mothers being ruled by their daughters, right? And this is a phenomenon in society. And if you don't have the right skills, and I see this with my clients, they don't have the right skills, so their life is miserable. They're running around trying to please their child, and they come up to me and they're like, I give my child everything. And I'm like, that's the problem. That is the problem. You're giving too much, right? Because then what does it become? It's like they become completely satiated. It's like going through eating a big buffet, overeating in a buffet, and then wanting to eat again. What is that feeling that you get, right? And a lot of kids, because they have been given so much, that's how they are throughout life. They're just satiated. And the sooner you implement, the sooner you catch this, the sooner you put these rules into effect, the better the impact is going to be. And I have individuals, I have one that I'm working with right now. Her child was really out of control. But after applying just a few of these skills, she has seen her transform. And now, like the toddler years alone could take like a whole conference, just talking about the toddler years, what you need to do, how you need to treat them, and all of these. And I'll give you just a few because we're limited on time. One of the things that you could do with, let's say, toddlers is if the first year you respond to them. They're crying, they need something, you tend to them. That first year is critical. First year is critical to build trust of the child. Don't let them cry it out the first year. After that, though, teach them that they don't cry to get things, that they don't have a tantrum to get things. I had my son, he's here right now, and he I had taught them from like 18 months old, and my little girls right here, mashallah, and they had learned from 18 months old that if they cried, I'm not gonna give them what they want until they stop crying. So at a very early age, they learned to control, to hold back. They wanted to be out of the crib, they're crying. I'm like, bidun beki, or without crying, and they would, pull themselves together, and that's when I would respond. And that taught them that, look, if you have a tantrum, I'm not responding to that. And I remember one of my older son, he should be here somewhere. So he was only maybe three years old. So he's like, as most kids do, they want to test the boundaries. Pardon me, you can't hear? The mic is not working properly. I'm going to try to speak as loud as I can, inshallah. Do y'all want to move up a little bit to make room for the sisters? All right. Men, you are totally outnumbered. You are outnumbered, mashallah. All right, that's cozier. This is nice. All right. Yeah, let's make room for our sister. So great. So I was telling you the story of my 3-year-old son, and he was testing the boundaries, right? So he wanted we were outside, and a lot of kids feel like, you know what, let me manipulate mom. If she said no to me, maybe in front of people, I can manipulate her. I can create a little, a scene and embarrass her into listening, right? So he's testing. He was testing it out. And he started, something he asked for, I said it's not happening. And he started, the yelling. He was a really good boy. It was this incident, right? So he yelled and he screamed. And although, you feel it as a mom, you're just like, it's nerve-wracking. But I reacted as if it doesn't faze me. I was like, you can cry, you can scream. Nothing's going to happen except that you're going to lose your voice. That's it. And people, everyone's looking at you, like, getting those dirty looks. But you just ignore it. And you're doing the right parenting skill. And you move on. And subhanAllah, few weeks later, my younger son tried to test the limit. Okay, so he was yelling and screaming for something I had said no to, and without me even responding, my older son turns to him and he said, that's not going to work with mom. You're just going to lose your voice. So he learned the lesson. And these are the things I'm talking about, like as far as toddler years. There's volumes that could be said about that, a whole conference, like I'm saying. But it's really important not to reinforce the bad behavior. So if you don't want them to nag, you don't want them to have a tantrum in the middle of Toys R Us, then don't respond to it. Don't give in. You got to hold your ground. Now, all these amazing moms that we heard about, they had one thing in common, and that was that they had a vision. They had a vision for their children. They saw what they're capable of, and that is so critical, right? And you see that Muawiyah's mom, what she said is that I won't even accept for him to be the leader of just the Arab world. She saw that what her son was capable of. And that is what we need. And we need to see, and I ask you, what is your vision for your kids? Think of 4 or 5 characteristics. What do you hope for your kids to have? Characteristics. What do you think? Confidence. Okay, that's a great one. What else? Respect. Patience, right? Some of the things that were very important to me was I wanted my kids to be very faithful, confident, compassionate, and to add value. I want them to be people that give to society, not just take, but they're people who will contribute to society. And when you have these things in mind, like Stephen Covey in his 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families, he talks about starting with the end in mind. Whatever you want to do, you have to have that end in mind. You have to see, you want to build a house, you got to have a blueprint and you have to have a plan, right? And that the same thing goes with raising children. You have to see, what is it that I want my kids to achieve? And how am I behaving to achieve that? Am I getting what I'm looking for? right? Am I getting what I'm looking for? And the way you behave with your kids is going to create memories, okay? And these memories can either be warm, fuzzy, lovable feelings that gives your child strength and confidence, or they will be memories that will haunt your children. Now, many of you may think that the majority of people that come to see me in therapy is because of depression or anxiety, but really, one of the number one reasons that people come into therapy is because of the way their parents either treated them, the things they said to them, or the things that they didn't say or do for them. So this is a big phenomenon. This is a major issue that we're facing. And so you want to think about it and see, do you want to be a part of your children's acceptance speech? You know, where they're attributing their success to mom. It's like, it's because of mom, or it's because of dad, because of their belief in me, because of their confidence in me that I achieved these things. Or do you want to be the reason that they end up in therapy? So you have to think about that. Okay? And and do you want to have your children, okay, and do you want your children to pray for you? Because we all know the hadith. It's working, alhamdulillah. Kind of. All right. We all know the hadith that it says when a person dies, all their good deeds end except all their... Sorry. Okay.
I'm her husband.
I'm glad you clarified. We needed that comic relief. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Where were we? All right. So we were talking about the hadith that when you die, all your good deeds end, except for three things, right? One of them is when you have a righteous child who prays for you, right? So here in this hadith is telling us one of the goals of parenting, in parenting is actually having righteous kids and having them pray for you, right? And in order to do that is that you have to build rapport, right? You have to have the rapport, and this is what I'm going to spend most of the time talking about, because a lot of times people go really hard about the Islamic principles, you know, the halal and the haram and being strict and restricting and all of that, without building the rapport, without communicating, without spending time, without having a good relationship. So if you want them to love you and you want them to make dua for you, then you need to build this rapport. And you need to make them love Islam, not fear it. And I think that is so essential. So every time you interact with your kids, you have that choice. You have the choice of, you know, making emotional deposits. Because with each person, it's like having a bank account. It's an emotional bank account. And every time you listen to them, every time you compliment them, you help them, whatever it is that you're doing, it is an emotional deposit. So when you're reacting and you have that end in mind, and you think that I want my kids to be like this, then even if you steer out of line, which we normally do, right? I mean, parenting is very difficult. I have three of my own, and I know how challenging it is. But once you know the end in mind, you can keep readjusting yourself. Do you know, what would you guess that a plane traveling from Dallas to, let's say, Chicago, what percentage of the time is it off course? What would you guess? What was that? Okay. It's actually 90% of the time it's off course. But how does it reach its destination? It keeps contact with ground control, and they keep readjusting to get back on track and reach their destination. And that's what we need to do as parents. There are times we may overreact. There are times we may be impatient and lose our temper, but we have to keep thinking about what is it that I want for my kids to achieve and get back online. Okay? What do you think was the attitude of these mothers? Do you think that the attitude of these amazing moms were like, I am so fed up with these kids. I'm sick and tired. They're driving me nuts. Do you think that that was their attitude? Which a lot of moms right now have that mentality, right? And what was amazing about them is that they saw the blessing that they had. They saw their children as an amana. They saw it as a responsibility, and it was something that they were very appreciative of. And they wanted to do the best with this amana that they had. And you find that there's so many people. I had several friends of mine who could not get pregnant. Okay, and they tried so many times and they had 4 miscarriages. And every time that she tried, she would have to have, it was like a $15,000 procedure just to get pregnant, subhanAllah. And she never got that baby. Now, if you appreciate the ni'mah that you have, you'll have a totally different attitude. You'll have an attitude of appreciation. You see them as a blessing and not as a burden. And having the right attitude in everything. If it's in business, if it's at school, and you have the right attitude, that's what's going to make you successful. If you take the example of, let's say, a student that has a bad attitude, right? A student that thinks that school is boring, I don't learn anything, it's a waste of time. What are they going to achieve if they have that attitude? The same thing with a parent. If a parent has the attitude that this is, I'm fed up, they're driving me nuts, this is so tiring, they're not going to be effective parents, correct? Now, how do you think we need to manage our attitude? What do you guess? How can we affect our attitude? It is through our self-talk. Self-talk is this internal dialogue that we have with ourselves. We're talking, do you know how many words a minute? 600 words a minute. Right now, you're talking to yourself, saying, what is she talking about? All right? And whatever you're saying to yourself affects the way you feel, your performance, what you achieve. And as a cognitive behavioral therapist, when someone comes to see me, one of the first things I start working on is their self-talk. Because what goes on in your mind affects your behavior. Now, what's amazing is that there's so much psychology embedded in the Quran and in the Sunnah. And as I was studying psychology, I was more and more impressed with all that was in the Quran that reinforces all the best positive behaviors. So for instance, Allah even encourages us to have positive thoughts. How does He encourage us? How does He reward us? By gratitude. Well, He encourages us, first of all, by putting so much emphasis on our niyyah, right? إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. That it's our intention. And also, if you have a positive intention, you want to go out and you want to, let's say, feed the hungry, and you want to do things for the refugees, but you never get out to do it, guess what? You're getting the ajr. So even He's encouraging us to have positive thoughts because it affects your heart, which affects your behavior. Okay? So, and it's really important when you have a good attitude, it's about being approachable and being accepting. A whole talk could be given on acceptance, because when the absence of acceptance of your children, accepting them as they are, accepting their ability, accepting their looks, accepting their intelligence, if you do this, you cannot imagine the results. And when you don't do this, it's disastrous. It's really disastrous. And the idea of being approachable, if you're approachable, that means you're smiling. You're smiling, you're friendly, and your kids feel like they can run to you and share with you. But if you're always frowning and you're angry and you're frustrated and you're losing it and mom's going to lose it and we're walking on eggshells with mom and we're walking on eggshells with dad, that's not being approachable. And if you're not approachable, guess what? They're going to go somewhere else. They're not going to come to you. They're going to go to their classmates. And so there are individuals, clients that I've had that they complain that their teenagers don't want to spend time with them. They're like, they can't stand us. They're just everywhere. And I ask them, I go, how do you make them feel? When they're with you, do you accept them? Do you make them feel accepted and loved? Because it's all about it's not what you say to people, but it's about how you make them feel. So if you make them feel special, if you make them feel accepted, they're going to love being around you. You're not going to have to, you don't have to manipulate them. You don't have to guilt trip them into spending time with you. It's because they enjoy it, right? So we have to definitely focus on having the right attitude as a parent. And each of these remarkable mothers, they totally focused on building their children's self-esteem. If you notice that in every story, it was about building them and emphasizing that. And when you realize that every single one of us needs validation, right? We all need to hear, you're okay, you're doing great, you're on the right track. We need that. And so these moms gave them the validation. And there's two different kinds of validation. There's external validation and internal validation. What these moms did is they gave them that internal validation. They made them feel so good about themselves that they relied on their own moral compass. That moral compass that was telling them what's right, what's wrong, and whether you accept it or not as a society, it doesn't matter. I'm going to do what's right. And that internal compass really strengthens a person. And it prevents them from going astray because they're not looking for other people's acceptance. External validation is when you become very needy. You're very needy and you don't feel good until someone gives you a compliment. If a lady wakes up, her husband doesn't give her a nice compliment, it's going to be a tough day, huh? But we can't be needy like that. If we have our own feeling of self-worth and we validate ourselves, we won't be so needy of the people around us, okay? And this other way of building self-esteem is making positive statements, okay? The ratio needs to be about 5 to 1. 5 to 1. 1 negative comment with 5 positive comments. I want you to think back to your last interaction with your kids. What was the ratio? What was the ratio between the negative comments? I see some guilty smiles. A lot of guilty smiles. The ratio between negative comments and positive comments, okay? 20 to 1? Yeah. Okay, did you have a comment? Okay, so we really need to be aware. We need to be aware of this, and in any relationship, whether it's with your spouse, whether it's with your classmates or your employers, you need to have that 5 to 1 ratio. If you give a criticism, you better be ready to dish out a lot of compliments, sincere compliments, inshallah. Okay. Now, so you make the positive reinforcement, and I had a friend of mine she had an exceptional daughter. She was really exceptional, and she happened to be paraplegic. Paraplegic, where she could only move 2 fingers. She could only move 2 fingers, and with those 2 fingers, mashallah, at the age of 16, she decided to wear hijab. Everyone tried to convince her not to. She's like, oh, haram, you're going to heaven anyway. You're paraplegic, you're going to heaven. And she said, I want to wear the hijab because I love Allah. I love Allah, so I want to wear it. And she cannot even put the hijab on. Someone has to put it on for her. And her mom believed in her. And most moms would say, my God, my child, she can't do anything. All she has is 2 fingers. What am I going to do with her? But she built her. She believed in her. And she kept inspiring her to work on the computer and to design. With these 2 fingers, she designed such amazing things. I have a picture that she designed in my home. And she became, not only that, she graduated and she designed such beautiful art that Haleh discovered her, mashallah. He discovered her and he was so impressed with her work that he took her and her whole family for Umrah on a private trip together. Isn't that amazing? And she was a girl, mashallah, that, she couldn't do much, but because her mom believed in her and just encouraged her to use those 2 fingers. And so look at the potential that our kids have. Look at the potential in them and help them, flourish that, inshallah. The key, well, first of all, it's the analogy I'd like to use is realize that when you're building self-esteem, it's like constructing a building. that every positive word is like a brick. It's a brick that you're putting in this building, okay? And then with the criticism, it's like a bulldozer. The bulldozer comes and crashes down the building. So, so you got to be building and make sure that you don't use that bulldozer so much. And it's so essential not to criticize. So one of the ways, so we talked about building self-esteem. What did we say? To build self-esteem, we validate our kids. We make that 5-to-1 ratio as far as for every one negative comment, you do 5 positive comments. And now it's about don't criticize your kids, right? Because don't make fun of their body or their facial features. There are some people that they just joke around like this. They'll call their kids, hey, fatso, hey, what else is there? Whatever, they see certain features, and they will make fun of their hair, their body. Has that happened to anyone that you know intimately? Yes? All right. So, you find that this has such a damaging effect. So many clients that I have are anorexic. They're anorexic. There was one individual, her father told her, you're so fat. Why can't you be skinny like your cousins? So she took this to heart, and she felt so insecure, she started starving herself. She starved herself, and she had to be hospitalized for 2 months because her heart rate had fallen down to about 33 beats a minute, right? And so you don't realize what damaging effect this has when you criticize the way a child looks, the way, their weight, their grades. You have to really build them. And if your child is overweight, do something about it. Increase the activity, improve their diet without bringing so much emphasis on it. And it's so critical not to call them names. A lot of times parents, they get frustrated, they get annoyed, so they start, saying some really mean things. They will say, you stupid idiot, you can't, you're a loser, you can never do anything. And you have to keep that in mind. It's like, is that the image you want your kids to have? Because whatever you're saying, the criticism, the name calling, all of that, guess what that's going to be? It's going to be your children's self-talk. That is what they're going to say to themselves. And I have certain clients that no matter how successful they are, right? I have one, mashallah, she graduated from an Ivy League school. She's religious, she's successful, and yet she feels worthless. She feels worthless because her parents told her she was worthless. And it's such a shame for us not to see the beauty in our kids and to nurture that beauty. And the key is to accept our children, accept them. And this acceptance, whether their personality may be completely different than yours. You may be outgoing and they may be shy. You may be athletic and they have no interest. You have to accept them for the way they are. You may be super intelligent and they may not have it together. So when you accept your kids, when you give them that glance of mercy, and when you embrace who they are, they will flourish. Because guess what? If they don't get the acceptance from you, they will go to any body to get that acceptance. And this is why I hear so many cases, just on a daily basis, I hear cases of individuals doing some horrible things online, horrible things with people, and I tell them, what made you do it? It's like, I just wanted to be accepted. I just wanted someone's attention. I just wanted someone's love. So as a parent, if we're not doing that, if we're not instilling all that love and attention and acceptance, they will go out and seek it elsewhere. Okay? And with these moms, you see that all of these moms, mashallah, had a beautiful communication style. They built rapport with their kids. They were friends with them. And I think this is something that we lose sight of. We lose sight of the fact that you have to communicate in an effective way. Yelling and screaming and threatening and all of that, all it's going to do is drive them away. And they're just not going to like you very much. So when you build rapport, and you remember that the Prophet ﷺ taught us that the first 7 years is all about training. They're not even accountable to Allah. Think about that. They're not even accountable, and yet we can sometimes be so harsh with them. So let's talk about communication. Okay, effective communication is using I statements. I statements is when you start with yourself. Because what happens when you say, like, you never do this? How does a person feel? They feel attacked, right? So if someone throws you a punch, what do you do in return? I should ask the guys, they'll react. If someone throws a punch at you, what do you do? Oh, you punch back? Okay, first you have to defend yourself. You just go right at it and you punch them out. You defend, first you defend and then you punch, right? So what happens a lot of times when people are communicating with one another is, whether it's a husband and wife, it becomes like a boxing match. You know, it's like, you never do this, and then they get defensive. Well, the reason I didn't do this is this, and then they throw an attack. So it becomes very much like a boxing match. And so we need to use I statements. If you use that statement of like, I feel sad when you don't call me or you don't spend time with me. And that's not threatening, right? You're just talking about your own feelings. And you say, and you rephrase. This is really effective if you use this with your spouse as well. So it's this idea of using I statements and rephrasing. So someone tells you something and you say, what I hear you saying, and this is the training that we got, extensive training in doing therapy with people, making a person feel heard. Don't we all just want to be heard, right? We just want someone to listen to us and understand us. So when you do that and you listen attentively by having eye contact, you can't be on your phone. You can't be on your phone like this, on your laptop. I'm listening, right? And watching TV. You got to have that eye contact. You got to listen with your ears, your eyes, and your heart. Okay? And it's critical to speak to your kids, not at your kids. What's the difference? At your kids, you're just giving lectures. Do this, do that, But when you talk to them, you wait for a response. It's an exchange. Now, a lot of times, we want our kids to share with us, right? We want to share. We want them to tell us everything that has happened, but yet we don't share much about ourselves. So we have to train them. We have to train them to have this ability to share. And it's so critical to share our difficulties and the lessons that we've had. A lot of times, parents want to appear perfect. Right? They want to appear like they don't make any mistake. I was excellent student, never did anything wrong, and they want to appear perfect. And I think it's important to show our kids that there were certain challenges that we had and how we overcame it. We lead by example. And a habit that I have with my children every day after I pick them up from school to get them to share is asking them, what was good about the day? Because if you ask, how was your day? Or, fine, right? You don't get much out of them. So you have to probe to get the right response. I've gotten so much information from you guys by asking those things, right? So we ask, well, what was good about your day? What was not so good? And you just can't imagine the stories that you hear. And if I had never asked that question, I would have never known, right? So suddenly you ask what was not so good. And you don't say what was bad, because then they're searching for the bad thing. You say, was there anything not so good? And suddenly they tell about a story that happened with their classmate or a teacher, and you get all this information. And you ask, what did you learn? And I never accept the answer, nothing. And you spend 8 hours. We're paying for a fine education, so you better come back with an answer with this. What did you learn? And it could be social skills. It could be sometimes, once my son said, I learned not to leave my lunch at home. Well, that's a good lesson. That's a good lesson to learn. Anything that you can learn. And the last question is, how did you add value? How was the classroom better place because you were there? How did you make someone's life easier, better? Because if you're not adding value, if your existence doesn't matter to anyone, then you really need to change that. We need to affect people. We need to have a positive impact. So that's a good way to get kids to talk and allow them to express themselves. A lot of times I think we're in the habit, and we're all guilty of it, of hushing our kids down, right? So we have to allow them to express their feelings, acknowledge their feelings, and another important thing is keeping the promises. How many times have you said, okay, if you're good, then I'm going to take you and we're going to go to the park? And that never happened. You never take them. And what's going to happen if you repeatedly don't keep your promises? They're going to not trust you, right? So even if something, you make a promise and you can't keep it, you have to explain to them. You got to explain and make sure that you don't lie, because this lying can really affect the trust and the emotions. Okay. I remember I had an Arabic tutor, and her child was acting out. And so she told me, she said, could you please tell my son that if he doesn't settle down, the police officer is going to come and take him away? I said, you asked the wrong person. I'm not saying that to your son. And you really shouldn't either, because what happens is that, first of all, it really destroys their sense of security. Or some parents are like, I'm gonna stop the car and I'm gonna leave you on the side of the road. Have you all heard that? Oh, I see some guilty laughs. All right. Well, that is destroying your kid's sense of security. They can't feel like, oh, mom's going to get mad, she's going to lose it, and I'm going to have to, be a homeless child. So you can't ever threaten them with things that you won't follow through on, right? And empty promises, because then they're just not going to like, oh, mom never follows through. It's just all a hype, right? Now, modeling good behavior, we saw that so many of these exceptional moms, they were all modeling the behavior. It was not just about, look at what I say, not what I do. They embodied it, they modeled it, and really that's the most effective way to teach our kids. Lead by example. And I remember when I was pregnant with my first pregnancy, and I felt like, okay, my husband and I decided we have 9 months to get our act together, right? We have 9 months. And there's so much hikmah in the fact that it does take 9 months, because you can emotionally, psychologically, financially, spiritually prepare for this incredible transition, right? And so it's really important to see yourself as the model, that you try to model the right behavior. You may, like I said, you might go off track from time to time, but it's good to admit it and get yourself back online, okay? And if you ever see a trait you dislike in your kids, look within. Look within. If you see them angry, look within. If you see them excessively, let's say, rude or sad or impatient, it's a lot of times they model our behavior, right? And we usually get more frustrated by the negative traits that we have in ourselves. So just look within and try to correct yourself. There was an example of a woman, her daughter was getting in trouble at school because she was hitting everyone. She was hitting them. So guess how she punished her? Starts hitting her. We're not supposed to hit in school. Okay? And it's like, it's pointless. So you have to model the right behavior. And we need to demonstrate the characteristics that we have. We have to really make sure that if we want our kids to be righteous, just like Sheikh Omar was saying, that if we want to be righteous, if we want our kids to be righteous, if we want our kids to memorize Quran, then we need to work on ourselves. And about apologizing to your kids. We all make mistakes, right? And when we can take ownership of the mistake, it's so powerful. I remember my mom, if she ever, went out of, she caught herself, she would always come and apologize to me. And I felt so respected as a little girl having my mom come and apologize. And I think, a lot of times we see kids who are not willing to apologize, right? That can be challenging sometimes, right? And so we need to model that. We need to model it by apologizing to our kids. And show your weakness from time to time, if it's age appropriate. I know one client had a real anger issue. She would break things, she would yell and scream. And through therapy, alhamdulillah, she learned coping skills. And she shared, she had teenage kids, so she could share with them. And she totally demonstrated how to have self-control, how to have anger management. So when we share our weakness, we say that the mommy has to work on her anger, and right now I'm getting some help. I'm working on it. I'm learning how to cope. That's powerful. because in the future they will have things that they will have shortcomings and they will learn how to overcome it. Okay? And you realize that all of this needs to be done, whether it's the good communication skills, building the rapport, spending time together and modeling good behavior before we can even start talking about the Islamic identity. Not that this is Islamic identity is of utmost importance, and sometimes people go directly to that and they only focus on that without doing the groundwork. This is so critical. You have to prepare the soil before you start planting the seeds, right? You can't just toss the seeds anywhere. So once you have their trust, once they love you, once you're spending time with them, and you make them feel heard and loved and appreciated and accepted, guess what? They're going to be receptive. They're going to listen. They're going to feel that mom or dad really wants what's best for us. And when you do that, that's when you can start establishing the Islamic identity. And this is really the essence of these, mashallah, this day conference has been about establishing that Islamic identity into our kids. And all of these moms did an amazing job. I mean, I'm so inspired by all these stories of how they sacrificed, they gave, and they put so much effort into, they didn't leave it to chance, right? They didn't leave it to chance. They didn't just make dua, oh, ya Allah, guide my kids. No, they strove. They strove in that and made sure, because you have to take the effort, right? And so, and what's really critical to do is create a positive association to Islam, create a positive association to the deen. The worst thing you can do is that you just scare them. Because there are some parents who just use the scare tactic, right? If you don't pray, you're going to hell. If you don't do this, you're going to hell. Like everything is about hell and punishment and torture. And I mean, if with a young child, this is going to just create very negative association. You make them love. You got to make them love it. And I think that was something I'm so appreciative from my mom, is that she really made me love the deen. And it might have not been so much about the ritual, but it was about loving and respecting the deen. And I think when you have that, then it goes such a long way. And as long as you make them love the deen, and I had an example, one client, when she came to me, she said, my teenage daughter, she can't stand me, we're always in a fight, and I don't know what to do. And I found out that all she's doing is, telling her, just emphasizing it's haram, this is bad, the criticism. The ratio was, 100 to 0, right? 100 negative, 0 positive comment. So what I told her, I said, back off. No more haram halal. Don't talk about that. Be her friend. I was like, when was the last time you had fun with your daughter? Like, fun? We're supposed to have fun? I just have to make sure she doesn't know anything haram. I said, be her friend. So she started doing things that she could build rapport with. They started going out together. I'm like, take her out for lunch, buy her flowers, do something special. So she started doing this. After like 2 months of toning down, and then toning down the negativity, building her up, and spending time together, her daughter wrote her a card. And in the card said, Mom, you are my best friend. And that girl, she was about, and the analogy I told the mom, I said, you have your daughter at a cliff, and the cliff is symbolic of Islam, and you're about to push her off. If you say one more thing, that could be the thing that will just let her, she will leave Islam. And I've had examples of that. I've had examples of really practicing families that they have pushed so hard and they have suffocated so much that the kids are like, I don't want to have anything to do with this. And they're going out and giving dawah to nations, and their own kids have left Islam. So when we teach about Islam, think about the end result, that you want them to love it. Are they going to love it if they hear hell, punishment, all of that? They have to feel excited. They have to feel like inspired about it. Now, building the Islamic identity, it's so critical that, you take them to successful Islamic events, coming to places like this, to conferences. They had the ISNA conference yesterday. Taking them to places like this, having them meet exceptional Muslims. We're really blessed in this community. I'm so happy we moved here, alhamdulillah, because we have so many amazing examples. So many amazing examples that our kids can look up to. And we need to teach them about these heroes, these Muslim heroes. A lot of times if you ask the kids about a soccer player or a basketball player, they can tell you the details, height, their favorite color, where they were born, what did they do. And then you ask them about a Sahaba, and they may not even know the name. So we have to make sure that we're instilling the right values. And as far as Islamic education, always has to be at the home and in the school. Now you have several options, right? If you put your kids in a public school, there are exceptions to that. As long as you have a good working environment and you teach them at home, there are people that can overcome that. But really, what I have seen, that the majority of people do have an identity crisis if they go to the public school and they're in the minority and they're being teased and they can't fit in. So that's a big risk. And Islamic schools, they're good, but it's not good enough, right? Because we have problems and we have issues. They're doing their best. God bless them. And inshallah, may they have more barakah. But it's never enough. We always need to supplement. And we always hear of stories even of kids that are in the Islamic schools going astray, unfortunately. I had one client whose son was a hafiz, and he was leading Taraweeh, and unfortunately, she was spending like 4 or 5 hours a day teaching him, and he got involved with drugs, unfortunately. So we can't just feel too relaxed, like, okay, they're getting the education and we're relaxed. We always have to be, spending time with them, finding out what's happening with them, and it's so essential to make Arabic and Quran the essential part of their education. I mean, mashallah, this community has so many resources. So many resources. You don't have to go far. You can stay right here and get all the education you need, inshallah. And make sure that you surround your kids with the best righteous friends. Not just for them. A lot of times the focus is about who are my kids friends with. But it's about who are you friends with, right? Because whoever you're associating with, you are silently approving their behavior. And there is a example of a lady who's quite righteous, but she happened to have very liberal friends. She was never affected by it, but guess what? One of the daughters decided to emulate those liberal friends, and that's the path she chose. So whoever you're associating with, you're saying these are good. Their behavior is good. I accept them. You're putting the stamp of approval. So be careful who you're spending time with, and make sure that you are involved with the Islamic community. And I think if we put our time and effort into our kids, make them a priority, build their self-esteem, give them the acceptance that they need, then we will have a much better ability to affect their Islamic identity. So inshallah, that Allah gives us the wisdom, the patience, the love, and all the ability to try to emulate those moms, those exceptional moms who raise sons like that, mashallah. So, jazakallah khair for your attention. Assalamu alaikum.